Hey Ann, welcome back after a little Thanksgiving, a U.S. Thanksgiving hiatus. It's good to be back with you.
Yeah, hey Mike, good to be back with you too. And it does feel like a little while now, but it feels good. It feels like there's some fresh energy kind of
Mm,
circulating and some new things sort of bubbling up that we get to have a look at today. So I'm curious and excited to jump in.
mm. Yeah, as you named fresh energy, I felt that kind of surge in myself as well, and I'm feeling a combination of tenderness and rawness, and also this joy and excitement. And I'm curious to see where it goes today, but. I guess to set a frame and a container for what we are going to talk about today, I've just been noticing my level of commitment to, I don't position myself as someone who holds space for men exclusively as a coach, but I've just been in touch with how important the work is because I have a few different examples, but in one, I am in a course where space was being held for a gentleman, which will keep it completely anonymous. And I could just see the wheels turning for him, that there was so much that and he explicitly named this, that he has so much going on in his inner world, but he has a really tough time articulating it and getting it out. And that he comes from a lineage where that was the case. And that whether it was his father or maybe even generations beyond, they all put lots of pressure on the generation that came next and their children. It's been this kind of passed down thing over and over and over again. And on a personal level, my maternal grandfather, I experienced him to be the same way, that there was so much happening inside of him. But while he was alive, he has passed away. He passed away early on in COVID, like right before COVID, actually. And while he was in a physical body on this planet, it seemed like there was so much happening that he just wasn't actually able to articulate. He wasn't able to get it out. And I think there's a lot of men who are misunderstood. They might show up a certain way and behind closed doors are a completely different person. And I'm just in touch with how important the work that you and I do is for men in particular, because there's this misconception that men don't have the same emotional landscape that women do, and I just know that to not be true. And so there, I have other things that are bubbling up for me, but I'll hand it over to you. What comes up for you as I share this, and yeah, where do you want to go from here?
Well, thank you for that lead in, Mike. And I really feel it in my heart when you give voice to that. I think it's so powerful as a man to be articulating that and speaking that out. So I'm really grateful. For anybody watching this as well, just to understand and develop the empathy and compassion for that. For some people, I think will immediately recognize what you say, and other people might go, "Oh wow, I didn't know that was going on." But it's certainly the experience that I witness in a lot of my clients, particularly the men that I'm supporting, and also in the masterclass I did recently. One of the topics, the men's only masterclass, one of the topics that came up was, yeah, I've got all this stuff happening inside me, but I can't give voice to it. And so, yeah, the question then for me is, well, what's happening? What's happening with this stuff? And there's a visual I really like. Actually, it's something that Michael Singer speaks to. So he's the author of the Untethered Soul, very famous personal development book. But he talks about having like hands inside of us, and like these hands are just sort of pushing things down, pushing, pushing, pushing. Like if there's no way to express it and to get it out in the world, then it's the only place is to be pushed down deep inside. And
Mm,
you spoke to sort of a tenderness, and for me that is tenderness, right? So all this stuff, I mean, some things might be, more on the positive end of the spectrum, but I think the things that we tend to push down um, tend to be more those difficult emotions, whether it's guilt, shame, anger, resentment. There's all kinds of a range of things in it, and I think it does produce such a tenderness. So yeah, just to really kind of acknowledge the dynamic that's going on there, and the challenge of holding all of that, and holding all of that energy inside of oneself. You know, it's for the person holding it, for the people around them. It's such a challenging space to be in, and I don't know if this is the way you want to go, but I'm curious, what do you think is the reason why that's so much harder for a man to express and give words to his internal experience as compared to a woman? I know we're speaking very sort of stereotypical gender terms here,
Sure.
but just to be general, what do you think it is that's different?
Yeah. I want to sit with that, and I don't want to pretend that I have a great answer here. And I think maybe one of my edges, this is another thing that I have personal challenge and difficulty with, is just admitting that I don't know, and seeking support, and asking for help. And while I don't know, I think I definitely have some useful things to say about this. There's an expectation. I don't know. So I guess one thing is just culturally, the type of, we'll call it the alpha male that we see. The the man that is portrayed as the best type of man, if you will, is typically some version of self-assured, doesn't really show when they're scared, only has access to anger. So anger is the thing that they do, and righteousness maybe goes along with anger when things feel chaotic or out of control. There aren't a lot of, like, if you think about pop culture or sports, there aren't a lot of men who are lauded for being vulnerable and saying, I need some other help here. I can't do this alone. It's quite the opposite. There are a lot of men who are lauded for being I don't know, the individualistic, marching forward, bootstrappy person who's got their shit together in the eye of the storm. They're just completely unfazed, and they are able to march on. And that might be true for some. Maybe there are men who are in the face, but in my experience, and my own personal experience, and in other men who I've had the pleasure of really connecting more deeply with, there's much more turmoil going on in our inner world, and we inevitably feel all the other things that we don't necessarily want to feel. So I think so culture is one level, that it's portrayed a certain way. What else? Yeah, I think even this might not be a gender thing, but I just, societally, there's a bias towards, in capitalism, there's a bias towards productivity, and there isn't a lot of spaciousness that is created for feeling in general, right? There's very much a bias towards commoditizing, and bottom line and profit. And there's not, if you look at the workplace individually, not even the home life, but if you look at the workplace in a capitalistic society, it is very much like, let's just problem solve, let's fix things, let's move to what's next, let's build, let's innovate, let's create the next solution. So it's a very solutions oriented, problem solving oriented capitalistic world in the West. And so you can't help but, as a man, you can't help in a lot of ways, unless you go counterculture, to try and place yourself in the system and optimize for it the best way possible. And it's really bold and courageous to be able to take a step back and say, the way the system operates is not really healthy for me. How can I operate best, such that I'm not burning myself out and avoiding what feels true to me in here. So those are a couple of things that bubbled up for me. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, that they're both, I think, really big things in isolation, and I also see them meeting because what I'm hearing, if I understand right, is that it's almost like there's this acceptable range of emotions. So
Mhm.
it's like if it's better to feel maybe angry about something than it is to feel sad, and because there's this vulnerable quality to being sad, right? It's
Mhm.
might be perceived as weakness, or whatever sort of other things you want to attach to it, not good enough, not strong enough, not capable enough. But whereas anger is something that's a bit sort of bigger, and yeah, let me make myself feel strong and powerful. But I think it's interesting because this is sort of a like a general societal expectation, but it doesn't really mirror what the inner experience actually is.
Mhm.
And I think it's interesting because the other thing I see in my practice, also supporting men and getting to have sort of a closer look at some of these things, is in some households anger is also not an acceptable emotion to be expressed. So
Mhm.
if you've got somebody who's raised in a household where anger is not okay, and then you're in the context of a society where being sad, for instance, is not okay, then it's like there's even more there that you have to push down. And
Mhm.
emotions give, it's like the word itself, energy in motion, emotion. There's all this energy swirling around. It's got to go somewhere. So that's where these like hands inside of us seem to come in, just to sort of join those two ideas there. um, and I think it's also important what you speak to in terms of the productivity, like because the emotions is maybe more the being, like how are we expressing ourselves, but there's also this doing aspect and all of the expectations around that, and the roles, like being the provider, yeah, being super productive, whether it's being an accountant or a lawyer that's billable to a certain extent, or
Mhm.
whatever it is. But there's all this stuff out there. Productivity hacking, for instance. I mean, it's really quite laughable when you look at it, isn't it? Because where do you then build in the spaciousness? And it's always the first thing that I talk about with people I'm working with who are like busy. It's not a great
Mhm.
word, right? Um, but it's like, well, where are you going to prioritize that white space? Where are you going to prioritize the rest and the spaciousness? And it actually has to be something that we schedule in like first, and then the rest comes around that. And it's just so interesting that we've come to a point where we are like that.
Mhm.
Because to me, it also speaks to this need, and this is sort of separate to the gender, but more the energy come from this need to be able to both occupy the doing, sort of masculine driving energy, and also the sort of flowing, nurturing feminine energy. And that's not a harmony we get by putting a man and a woman together. It's a harmony we need to
Mhm.
cultivate in ourselves if we want to really experience true well-being from the inside out.
Mhm.
So there's just so many enormous pressures on men, I think, that are just not given a voice.
Yeah.
I'm seeing a little bit more these days, and I'm particularly looking for it, and looking to try
Mhm.
and join in on these conversations. But I think there's so much room for more of it. So
Yeah.
I'm really glad that you're out there giving a voice to it, Mike.
Mhm.
And as you said, there's people in your space that are also having these conversations. So
Yeah.
it's clearly a need that's there, and it's been hidden for so long, and it's great to see it starting to come up. But we need to keep making these invitations, I believe, and keep having these conversations.
Yeah. We certainly have come a long way. I mean, as you name this, Michael Phelps, the famous Olympic athlete and swimmer, he's been publicly talking about his mental health and the challenges that he faced and the depression that he faced for a while. And Kevin Love, a famous basketball player, publicly spoke about his mental health challenges. But it's become this is the way that I'm seeing it, the way that I'm perceiving it. It's that I think we're starting to become more accepting as a society that it is that we're not defective for having mental health challenges, and we accept it when other people name it, but we don't. It doesn't seem like we've made that much progress in accepting it in ourselves, because we start to uh a lot of people that I know might run down the list of, but I had a loving family, and I had this, I'm a privileged person, blah blah blah. And I think no matter what you have or what you've been given, like we all, these are all things that we face. It's not. I know I'm trying to be careful because I'm coming from a place of privilege, and so I don't want to speak to people who maybe aren't coming from a place of privilege, but I don't think there's any amount of money you can have, or status, or whatever it is. There's no externals. There's nothing in the material world that can fill that need to be seen and to be heard for exactly as you are, for who you are. And we do ourselves a real disservice if our whole life is geared towards being productive and kind of just marching forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think you touched on something really important there, because I think that the mental health conversation is super important, and it's getting some airtime. But there's this other aspect I think it's also really important, is like sort of value-based decision making.
Mm.
And that comes with, as you say, knowing who you are and what you stand for, and having a space where people can see you and hear you and acknowledge you is a really important, like, we can even describe it as a mechanism for us getting clarity of who we are. Right? And I think we all need that. We all need these sort of mirrors around us to help refine that and question that and understand that. And I think understanding what you truly value is really, really, critical for guiding some of these choices and putting ourselves in situations in life which do give us a sense of fulfillment and meaning. So I'm not sure if you're a Formula One fan at all. Are you? Do you ever catch the racing?
I'm not a Formula One fan, but I'm definitely,
No.
you piqued my interest.
Yeah. So Sebastian Vettel, you may have heard the name on the sports news here or there, but he's a German Formula One driver with a very impressive career, and he retired this year. And a number of months ago, when he announced his retirement, he put a speech out explaining why he made his decision, and it was based in values. And what's important to him, and I thought it was just such a beautiful thing to see and to witness somebody like that, in a sport like Formula One. I mean, it doesn't get much more of a sort of a man's world in terms of the sports. So it was just really wonderful to see that, and he spoke to the importance of him connecting with his family and communities, and engaging with nature, things that are important to him. And I thought that was just really a great thing to see, really great to put out in the world, and to be that example of, yeah, we can make decisions based on values. So again, I know he's in a pretty nice position financially where he can make those kind of decisions. But I think we all have the capacity to gear ourselves and steer our life decisions based on what is really important and meaningful for us. But sometimes the expectations that we have or that other people hold on us that we're unwilling to challenge and have open conversations about can make us feel, and I see this again a lot in my male clients, can make them feel like there's just not an opportunity to embrace those values and to be guided by them. So I think that's really another important part of the conversation is, yeah, what is important and meaningful and fulfilling, and what does light you up, what does enable you to feel like you can reach more of that full expression and enjoyment of life, and that you're not just there sort of making sure everybody else's life is running well by being the provider or whatever other roles that men tend to take on more typically. So it's a really interesting kind of landscape that we've got out there to navigate for men, and it's so full of nuance and a lot of sort of cognitive dissonance to a lot of conflicting ideas in this age of, you know, women's empowerment and
Yeah.
how do men navigate that. So
Hmm.
it's yeah, there's lots of ways that we can look at this.
Mm. Yeah, and I've got my eye on time, and we're on the very back end here. But something that I'm in touch with in this moment is just, well, if I ask myself, where does the shame around really revealing yourself and your true nature come from? I know personally that if you just say, I don't know, a basketball locker room in high school, if I was showing up to that type of environment and saying, I'm really nervous before the game starts here, that probably would have been something that was ridiculed. And so I think it's something that I didn't explicitly name before in terms of where the shame, why do men kind of pack it in and bottle up so much, is that we very often we learn when we're young that it's going to be made fun of if we start sharing what's really happening, and so we kind of sequester that part of ourselves and tuck it away. And
Mm-hmm.
inevitably, which we did explicitly name, the energy gets, it's what you said about Michael Singer, right? So that the hands kind of just keep pushing it down, and when that energy gets stuck, then there's all sorts of different health challenges that might emerge as a result of that. So yeah, we're going up against a strong current for men to not show up this way. But it might sound like maybe we're a little pessimistic and bullish about how society is not doesn't create the space, but I really do think that we are turning a corner in general consciousness. Like I see a greater concern for the collective. I see a greater concern for personal health, that
Mm-hmm.
uh, it's not just about generating the most money. It's not about individual status. Like, how can we do what's for the greatest good of ourselves and for all? And I do feel generally hopeful about the direction that this is all going, but there's lots of excavating and digging to be done still.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm so with you on that, Mike, and I feel very blessed to be in the position where I am an ally for men, not just for the sake of men, but for the sake of everyone. Because I
Mhm.
really believe when men are doing well and can find more balance and satisfaction in their lives, we all get to benefit. Um, you know, men are equally important as women and any other human who walks this earth. So I think really just meeting these conversations with a little bit more, yeah, openness, curiosity, creating space, and allowing there to be a whole number of expressions of what it means to be a man. Also, I don't
Mhm.
want to pretend that there's just one kind of, you know, right way to be a man. It's about cultivating what it is for the individual and just making room for whatever that expression needs to look like to be authentic.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, really inviting the conversation to continue beyond this space, and I think we'll inherently keep coming back to it from different approaches in future episodes. But yeah, I
Mhm.
just really want to invite everybody watching also to just consider it a little bit, and see how you can create a little bit more space and a little bit more safety for the men in your lives, just to be who they are,
Mhm.
and ask them how they're doing, and really just show up for them as you would expect them to show up for you.
Mhm.
So yeah, so celebrating the men in the world, at the end of this conversation, and inviting them into being more of who they are.
Mhm. Yeah. And maybe as like a cliffhanger, something that we can, as we wrap here, I've been doing a lot of reclamation work, like maybe owning the parts of myself that I previously had sequestered. And one of the statements that I might say is something along the lines of, I am a gentle and sensitive man, and that is great. And
Mm,
allowing myself to really feel there might be resistance that emerges from that, which it still happens sometimes, but if we can get in the practice of saying what's true to us enough times, then we can integrate it into our actual reality. And reclamation work and yeah, there's other stuff in there. Like we can get more into that in a different conversation. But I just at the end here, I want to invite, if you're a man who's listening, maybe think of what's something, an aspect of yourself that you were ridiculed for when you were younger, but you know is part of your true essence and your true nature. And how can you bring that back into your life? There's a lot of
Mm.
power to be had there.
I love that. It's a beautiful invitation to wrap up on. So thank you
Mhm.
for that, Mike. Thank you for sharing that part of you. And I am personally so grateful for your sensitivity and gentleness. I think it's a wonderful asset. So celebrating that in you and inviting all men who watch along with us into that same energy and same conversation.
Mhm.
Thanks again, Mike, for jamming with me on this.
Thank you, and thank you everyone who tuned in, and sending everyone lots of love.